You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
So last night I woke up 3 times. I had the worst tummy upset ever. Yeah, and last night I was doing a late podcast with my beautiful friend Jerry, who's a tattoo artist from the States. He's quite a few hours behind, 7-8 hours behind, and the only time he could do it was late at night for me. We didn't even do the podcast then because he had tech issues. I spent 90 minutes trying to get him to. So I've not had much sleep. I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm going to have my coffee and I just want to sit back and watch you two. And guys, everyone listening, Ursula is a legend. She's a friend. Michael, as you can see on his t-shirt, works for Mossad. Ursula and Michael are best friends. I'm friends with Michael, but I haven't been in touch with him as much as I would have liked because he works for Mossad and I don't trust him. No, I'm just joking. So basically what's going to happen is the first half, Ursula is going to just talk about Legatum and how that links with ARC. And then Michael will maybe add some bits and pieces here and there. But then later half, he's going to talk about the structure of ARC and who's really behind it in terms of the people in the front and, you know, what's been said at the recent second convention and whether they're the antithesis of the WEF, which they kind of purport that they are, and they're for the people. So, you know, I thought that's a good place to start. Anyway, Ursula, Michael, I love you guys. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate all the work that you're doing and your wonderful Substacks. I know I don't normally do this, but you know what, guys, both of you, can you quickly tell people where they can find your Substacks? Because I think you do really good work and I don't think you're being followed by enough people. Michael, you are a bit ranty sometimes. I love you still anyway for doing that. I'm a bit ranty too. But anyway, Ursula, where can they find you? And then Michael.
Okay, I'm an educationalist by trade. So in terms of education related research, etc., you can just find me on ursulaedgington.com. I do write a regular Substack under the name Informed Heart. You should be able to find me under my name and Informed Heart on Substack. I post there every week. And yes, Michael, I also sometimes co-author things and we share information between us all the time. So follow both of us if you're interested in this topic or anything related to it.
Great, thanks. Michael, my friend.
As far as for me, most of my work is found on Substack as well. So it's actionabletruth.substack.com. I also have a Rumble channel that is linked from the Substack, but it's basically the same. It's rumble.com/actionabletruth. That's probably the 2 best places to find my work. There's a podcast, but the podcast is always published on the Substack as well. So that's all linked from there.
Amazing. Thank you, both of you. And it's really funny, when I first kind of like found out about both of you at the same time, I didn't know you knew each other. And I was like, oh, I'm reaching out to both these guys and I'm talking to them and they're so interesting and they're so fascinating. And then it's like, yeah, we know each other. I'm like, what? Like, I'm not surprised. Anyway, great minds, you know, think alike and whatnot. Anyway, Ursula, kick off.
Okay, so the objective of today is to talk about primarily the ARC conference, which, as you said, is actually the 3rd conference that they've just had in London. And the overarching kind of theme of our conversation today is, why is it so important, right, to look at ARC, to discover more about it? And from my perspective, outside of the UK, but as a POM, I've been in New Zealand for 11 years now, my heart is breaking looking at basically a coup is going on, right? The politics, the democracy, the human rights, everything is just being demolished. And the coup is happening as a result of pseudo alternative political parties coming in and stealing people's, I don't know, stealing their votes, but certainly stealing their minds, because people believe that there is a genuine alternative to the broken political system that is the Tory party or the Labour Party, the Uni Party, right? So this coup is happening and ARC is just one small segment of that coup. This coup is happening because it's being funded by some very wealthy elites, and the entities that are driving this coup are very closely connected to the Legatum empire. So that, from my perspective, that's why it's so important to investigate, follow the family tree and find out where the funding is coming from, who are the main players, what is their agenda, who are they connected to, just to try and understand, just out of researchers' curiosity, really, just to understand a bit more about not only how it's happening, but why it's happening and why some people still can't seem to see it. You know, there's a massive coup going on, and some people still believe that politics is fixable, you know, and that citizenship can be reclaimed and our human rights and, you know, freedom of speech, etc., can be reclaimed and reformed under the new Reform Party.
I'm going to interject. I want to stay quiet, but you're 100% right. Listen, I was invited twice onto the Nigel Farage show. Both times, the producer made it clear that my position was because I'm a private surgeon, I was going to bash the NHS. And I recently saw a poll where they said, you know, which political party would you trust the NHS with? And Reform Party was out in front. And I think what you're talking about is that the people's natural frustration with traditional politics and their hope and desire for change is being hijacked and sabotaged by these alternative parties. I think that's what you're saying. And the problem is, I can tell you, having spoken to Farage, that he's not a fan of the NHS. And neither am I, believe it or not. Now, you might think, well, what's your problem, Ahmed? You're both seem to be on the same page. No, I'm not. So the traditional thing that we're always presented is the Hegelian dialect, the Overton window, the framing. You've either got this or you got that. You got the NHS or you got private healthcare. Guess what? There's always other alternatives. Not a third alternative, but third, fourth, fifth, sixth. What do I mean by that? So the NHS is a centralized Soviet-style bureaucracy, highly corruptible, influenced by big pharma at the top and politicians, and is brainwashing all the doctors and providing a very poor service, harvesting taxpayers' money and funneling it to management consultancy firms and big pharma. It's not good, right? Now, the alternative that these people want to offer is an American-style, big insurance, big hospital group, big pharma-led private healthcare, which in fact, not really much different, other than it's not as centralized, okay? I don't want that. What I would like is a private healthcare where you've got local communities and local charities running the hospitals, and they're all independent, and the doctors are not highly regulated, and the big pharma influence isn't there, big marketing consultancy firms influence isn't there, politicians can't dictate policy, everything's local charitable hospital. And guess what? It existed like that in the Victorian era. You would have your local town, people chipping in and paying for a hospital, and you would go and pay for your doctor and pay for the hospital, but you weren't being ripped off, and it was a form of private healthcare, you know, and that's what I want, a decentralized, localized healthcare system. But this is not what we're being offered. What we're being offered is globalized private healthcare. And people are voting for reform because they think, oh yeah, they're the hope, and they're not. It's very sinister, this hijacking. Now, why do people want this hopium? I mean, we can see it left, right, and center, because people keep saying, oh, well, you know, if we can't believe in them, but then we're all done for it, because they don't believe in themselves. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Keep going.
No, absolutely. So what we're going to do is pan out to see the bigger picture of what the Legatum, the funders of things like ARC and the Reform Party, are. And then afterwards, Michael can give some detail about the ARC conference itself and what part that plays in terms of its marketing for this coup. There's no other word for it, is there really? So I've got a little diagram to show, which I'll turn to in a second. But I've just kind of summarised my notes. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read it out and, yeah, ask any questions at the end, maybe, so I can get through it all. Because, you know, it's nearly my bedtime. It's late over here, early there. So there you go. So the Legatum Group, basically they call themselves a partnership of partnerships. It's a network within a network within a network. And it's so complicated that we can only scratch the surface in terms of telling people today what it is, or our understanding of what it is. So this is just an overview. So it was established in 2006 by wealthy globalists Christopher Chandler, Mark Stollerson, Philip Facilio, Alan McCormack. We don't have time to go into too much detail about the founders, but briefly, Chandler was originally a Kiwi by coincidence and has a very interesting Eastern European / Russian context and background. Mark Stollerson has a background in law, and if you do a search on his name, you'll see that he often promotes international digital currency. Philip Facilio, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a ex-Goldman Sachs guy, property developer in Dubai. And finally, Alan McCormack is ex-JP Morgan and heads most of what Margaret Anna Alice cleverly calls the philanthropath entities. I love that word. They are philanthropaths. So Sir Paul Marshall is also a significant player in the Legatum group, but I'm going to turn to him in a minute. So I'm going to show, hopefully, my little diagram that is a work in progress. So this is my little spider diagram of all of the tentacles of the Legatum empire. So what is Legatum? At the center of this spider diagram, basically an investment bank. So keep in mind about this phrase, return on investment. That is what they're about. They're seeking return on investment through investments like insurance policies and shareholder returns. So the phrase impact investors is relatively new, came about sort of 2018-ish in regular language in the investment bank. What is an impact investor? It's an investment type which looks at an aspect of society that needs improvement. An obvious choice would be homelessness or lack of nutrition. So especially in the developing countries around the world, it promotes investment in these types of communities, countries as a way of greenwashing the profiteering. So from my understanding, the promotion of this kind of investment is hinged on sort of virtue signalling, but doing public good. So it's framed as a charitable purpose, even though it's a commercial enterprise, profit-seeking, and because most of these entities are public-private philanthropic partnerships, these companies have their shareholders as their primary priority. So obviously more important than the needs of any particular individuals who happen to be homeless or whatever. So how do they go about their business? They're measuring their so-called success in these poverty-stricken communities overseas, and it's very, very clever how they do it. So I'm interested in this basically because my PhD work was about how Ofsted in the UK measure educational outcomes. And anybody familiar with that kind of debate will know that it's a tick box exercise in order to get a specified outcome. And so, yeah, it's changing criteria, measuring things that can be arbitrary, can be very unfair. We've got a similar system here in New Zealand. Once an entity provides incentives for proving that a certain intervention, whether it's health, educational poverty, or some other element of our society that may be perceived to be lacking, has improved, then those pieces of evidence are always going to be subjected to pressures and potentially manipulated. So for Ofsted inspections, again, as an example, I know that when I was in the UK, my manager would be strategic in giving potentially troublesome students a workplace secondment during the time of an Ofsted inspection, so that there was less of a risk that a lesson could be sabotaged by inappropriate behaviours or whatever. So we know that some of these issues, whether they're for improvement or not, can't necessarily be measured entirely with data or with theoretical computer modelling. And we've lived through that before during the COVID era. So trying to put a number on something that isn't necessarily quantifiable is what impact investors do. And they do it very well. They've had good practice at it. They have it down to a fine art, in fact, because not only are their jobs reliant upon it, but their shareholder profits expected. So they find a problem, like you were saying, Ahmed. They find a problem, they ascribe a number to it, they pin a particular problem at a particular level, and then perhaps when it suits an impact investor manager to say later on that a particular level has been improved as a result of any intervention that they've invested in, that's the outcome that they want. That's because the methodology that's involved in collecting that data is often flawed. We can't really go into that now, not enough time, but I've written about it before, and that's what we spoke about, Ahmed, wasn't it, in terms of academia being captured by the funders and the research. So collected a list of useful texts on this subject, and I've written about it. It's basically about collecting a false citation and building, like the turtles all the way down in terms of the vaccine industry. Once you've established a reference for a particular piece of research, then you just keep quoting it, and in the end it gets forgotten that that's not actually a valid piece of research. So I'm just going to briefly describe the 7 main tentacles, although it's grown a new one recently.
Before you do that, just very quickly, is there any example that you can use of the impact investment, like one example of what they've done?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you some examples because they're within the tentacles of what they do.
Go for it.
So the Legatum Institute, which I'm showing on my diagram here at the top.
Yeah, zoom right in, because otherwise it's difficult for us to see. Like, really zoom in. Yeah, that's it. That's great.
The Legatum Institute, basically the main aims as you can see, are to present the science trademark. So it's linked to many different academic institutions globally. I've just listed some of them there, like LSE and Stanford University, and in Australia, the ANU. And we've come across some other ones this week, but I haven't added those in yet. So the Legatum Institute infiltrates institutions like this by providing scholarships and research grants, investing in property or renovations. These funding streams capture researchers and maintain the narrative because, of course, in order to apply for the funding grants and the scholarships, your research has to be in a particular area, has to meet a certain criteria. There's a link here to the Bosch hospitals, part of the Bosch Foundation on the right-hand side there. That's the laboratory kind of testing element, the science of the academic claims that they're trying to make. And there's a link to Australia and ANU, which has popped up in the last couple of years in terms of the pro-COVID vaccine narrative.
What is the ANU? Sorry.
The Australia's National University. Michael can talk about that maybe later, but there's connections to all kinds of universities in Australia for some reason. Yeah, Stanford University is there. So Stanford University is where J. Bhattacharya and the Great Barrington Declaration was based, and the Stanford Internet Observatory, which has been closed down recently, but that was the centre of the Omidyar fake fact-checking centre, whatever you want to call it, where all the major fake fact checkers were based. Yeah, the LSE, the London School of Economics, is there as well. They've got an institute or a department, a lecture hall, etc., that's funded by Paul Marshall, that I'm going to talk about in a second.
I didn't know how heavily influenced LSE was from the Fabian Society.
Yes, that's right.
And that's fascinating. Fabians are basically undercover wolf in sheep's clothing Marxists.
Yeah.
And here they are funding an economics school. And then I thought, surely economics school is like capitalist. And then I realized economics is purely Marxist ideology and brainwashing
it can
people.
Be, yeah.
It's just nonsense. And then, I mean, Tony Blair, I think, was putting up a stained glass window at LSE, and there's a wolf literally in sheep's clothing on it. It's horrific. It's in your face. It's always in your face.
Yeah. Economics is very much about the computer modelling, right? So it's a useful tool for the pro-narrative groups. So, yeah, Paul Marshall, just to touch on that, he's sort of semi-hidden partner of Legatum. He's a very wealthy philanthropist, if you like. His personal fortune is estimated at over £680 million. He's on the Sunday Times rich list. His father was apparently chairman at an oil company turned big pharma Unilever. And he was educated in all the right places where he undoubtedly would have mingled with the likes of Boris, Nick Clegg, Gove, all the usual names. His career included a role with BlackRock before founding what was one of London's first, but is now one of Europe's largest, according to The Guardian, hedge fund groups. That's Marshall Wace LLP. And the help of £25 million came from George Soros at a convenient time in his startup. So Marshall is currently chairman and chief investment officer of Marshall Wace, and one of the world's leading equity managers with assets of more than $60 billion. I was
just going to say that I read about that Soros investment. I mean, that's a lot of the people that we hear of. They get that starter fund from the CIA or the military industrial complex, or the intelligence agencies, or someone like Soros. That makes a huge difference. That's what kicks off, because money makes money. And Soros is an interesting character. He's a very interesting, and we know about his agenda. Michael talked about it in our last podcast, I think. Yeah, and I think his ideology is also very interesting. And I don't really if someone helped you out in such a way and literally kind of kickstart your career, would they ever be disloyal to that kind of person? I doubt it.
Yeah.
I don't think so. If Michael gave me 25 million or 50 million, and then it became, I'd be friends for life. Anyway.
So I just want to make one quick comment on that, Ahmed, because I'm going to forget later on. So what you're saying that a lot of these people got their stuff from intelligence agencies, from certain unsavory characters. I think I really want to highlight a term that I first heard Peter Duke from the Duke Report use. I don't know if he came up with it himself or it's someone else's, but it's a very, very good term. And the term is made men. Okay? Musk is also a made man. So all of these people, they didn't come like, out of nowhere. They've been selected. They've been like earmarked, maybe even from their childhood, especially if it comes from a family background, right? And at a certain point, like, someone has taken them under their wing, whether it be an intelligence agency or one of those billionaires, and say, okay, well, I'm going to introduce you to these people. You go to these people, they're going to give you money, then you're going to go and invest in that, and then you're going to start a company that does that. And as long as you follow orders, you're going to become a very wealthy man. So I think that is a term that is not used enough, and I think it's something that has to be really highlighted. And all credit, I'll openly say all credit to Peter Duke. I've never heard this term before, and I think it's a very, very good term. Or else shut up.
No, that was a great point, and yeah, I love it. Made men. I'm not a made man. You're not a made man. You're not a made woman. These people
No.
are made. This idea that they're all Tony Starks, Iron Man type characters, charismatic, rich, successful, super clever, independently just got there, is literally just science fiction. It's just TV propaganda.
Yeah. No, it is really interesting looking at the background of these people and seeing where their wealth might have come from and where their wealth connect. I mean, certainly going to the right school, right, in the right era was helpful for lots of people. So just going back to Marshall's sort of just blurb, basically, to give you an idea of what sort of guy he is, potentially, or where his wealth came from. It was 2012 that he was advisor to Nick Clegg, who obviously went on to be president of global affairs at Meta. When Nick Clegg, was in coalition, it would have been a very strategic position for him as advisor then. So anyway, he was knighted in 2016 for services to education and philanthropy because he was already involved at that point in the public-private partnerships in education and setting up academies like ARC, which is really funny because they've used the same name, right? ARK, not ARC, for the private.
I saw that, and I think the guy was like, "Oh, this is a cool name," and he was like, "This is my baby," and he was like, "Oh man, I still like that name. I want to resurrect it." I think it's obvious what was going on there.
Yeah, it's really strange. So going back to the diagram, actually, we ought to mention, because I know we mentioned it the other day, the fact that Marshall also owns the media outlets like The Spectator and GB News, but we're going to come back to that.
While Ursula's doing that, Michael, I just want to tell you I love you very much.
Too much information.
Even though I work for Mossad, eh? That's a joke for anyone listening because I already get enough crap as it is, so yeah.
So MIT, just before I move on to the case study of Luminos Fund, MIT, which is, people will know, Massachusetts Institute for Technology, where lots of people have their own buildings, and the Legatum Institute also has its own building. I think Steve Kirsch has his own building as well there. Lots of people have been investors over the years. So there's scholarships and grants available to students and staff there. Basically, that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of, the function, as I said, of the Legatum Institute is to make sure that these high-ranking universities all over the world control the narrative in ways that we've discussed before and I've written about extensively. So moving quickly on, because I know that we can't stay on this all for hours and hours. I could talk about this all day, so I'm just going to briefly touch on the other tentacles. So moving on to the Luminos Fund, which is very much linked, as you can see, to the Legatum Institute. So the aim of the Luminos Fund is to deliver intensive education in Africa and Middle Eastern countries. They do catch-up lessons, right? So students who have been out of school, maybe they're in a war zone or there's been a flood or some catastrophic climate change, in inverted commas, issue, then they go in, they supply some educational material, they have volunteer teachers, and then allow catch-up lessons, which on the surface sounds great. As an educationalist, this is really valuable work. And I'm not disputing that there definitely are students who have benefited from this intervention. But the questions start at the very beginning with what learning resources are these children being given in these catch-up lessons? And for instance, they're often using English language books or devices, that are in English. So they're not necessarily promoting the use of their mother tongue, and they're not maybe being culturally sensitive to the diversity in the classroom. And why is that? Well, the CEO of the Luminos was involved with UBS. So that one of the partners is UBS Optimus Foundation, which is UBS. I don't know if people know UBS. It's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, group of banks. They're based in Switzerland. They own Credit Suisse, for instance. They're an investment wealth manager, they call themselves. So again, they're trying to greenwash themselves and have this philanthropath. And so they partner. That's what the Legatum talk about in terms of the partnership of partnerships. So they're partnering with another foundation which also seeks to be doing a public good, and whether that is actually a public good or not is problematic. So yeah, a big focus of the catch-up lessons is the words per minute. So they're measuring how many words children can read in a minute and measuring it at the beginning of the course and the end of the course, and hey presto, they can read really quickly, and what a fantastic job we've done at teaching children. That's what's really important in life, is how many words per minute you can read. Not. So yeah, you get an understanding then of what the data is like and how manipulated it can be to provide an outcome that basically addresses this Hegelian kind of, here's the problem, these kids can't read. Oh, we'll go in, we'll teach them to read the words that we want them to read, and then we'll measure how many words per minute they can read, and great success. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
yeah, it does.
When you read the actual research, it's quite depressing because the researchers aren't being genuine. You can see in their writing that they're trying to get an outcome which isn't evident in the research. So they explain things like, well, these kids, they can't come to school every day because they're needed on the farm, right? They're needed to carry water. They're in very rural.
Can you just stop sharing screen for a second? I want to share screen. And don't worry about time. Let's just keep going, man. It's all right. It's all good. So basically, this is the Luminos Fund. A nice little girl. At age 11, Bethlehem is finally starting school. They got metrics. 1 in 5 children in sub-Saharan Africa is out of school. 92% of children in low-income countries can't read by the age of 10. How many countries are they talking about? What population sample did they do?
Exactly, yeah.
$10 trillion are lost each year as a result of children not learning. Yeah. And you're like, where'd you come with that information from?
Exactly right.
What children are we talking about? Are we including the world? You talked about Sub-Africa here. Does that frame it? And you assume Sub-Africa means that? Sub-Africa doesn't generate 10 trillion in GDP. That's nonsense. So, they're framing the kind of your mindset. Millions are, but at the same time, metrics, devil's advocate, is a nice way of doing things. When I set up my first podcast, it was like, this many years I've trained, this many patients I've treated, this many operations. So, I can see why you'd want to do something like that.
Yeah.
And then Luminos runs catch-up education programs, joyful activity-based learning, assessment-based instruction, student-centered classrooms, foundational literacy and numeracy. I mean, this all sounds great. And our results, so they want to say, look what a great job we're doing, over 300,000.
Common thing you'll see on all of the impact investors' websites is these kind of statistics. They love to have those prominently on their homepage.
Yeah. And the reason why is because people are simple and people get caught by these numbers and figures and just believe them and go, wow, isn't this great? 90% of graduates transition to government schools, more likely to complete primary school than their peers. So you read all this and you go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
This is so cool. Training local teachers. I mean, this all sounds great. So, devil's advocate, if they're doing what they're saying, I kind of think to myself, what's wrong with this? This is brilliant.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you, Ursula? Why are you against all this?
I mean, one of the questions about this one is why are they based in places like Lebanon and the Gambia and Liberia? I mean, they've got close connections with the Liberian government. We know how corrupt these countries and governments are, and Ethiopia, it's very interesting.
Yeah, so you've basically got, so their sub-Saharan Africa is actually 4 countries.
Yeah.
Those 4 countries, they do not have $10 trillion of GDP.
Lost each year.
$10 trillion are lost each year. This is bullshit, right? In terms of sub-Saharan. Yeah. Come on, listen. I mean, what the budget, the gross domestic product of these 4 countries is probably not even like $500 billion. Never mind 10 trillion lost. So what I'm trying to say is, do you see how, and that's just one statistic we've picked, how statistics can be manipulated and, used out of context. And then you think, well, if you're lying about that, what else are you lying about? So, for example, I had a guest on my podcast and I gave him a bit of a hard time because in his website, he was like, 1 million people directly impacted by my podcast. I was like, geez, Louise, dude. Like, I mean, I've like in 25 years as a doctor, probably impacted 20,000 people. In the last year and a half, your podcast has directly impacted 1 million people. Like, how? How do you know this? What did you, and you know, and it was all management gobbledygook nonsense. And I held them to task about that. Some people might say I was a bit harsh, but I have no patience for this BS, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Totally.
carry on.
So, final point about the Luminos Fund is that they use this gaming aspect of education. So they'll be given free, in inverted commas, devices for some of the children to use from Hewlett or Dell, and they will have applications that are games that supposedly encourage them in their language or maths skills. And the company that is running that particular aspect of their business is Supercell, which some people might recognize. You know, they're one of the biggest gaming companies, entities in the world. So I wonder, you know, it's great that they've got free devices in the classroom and they're engaging, they're using these quizzes and they're competing against each other or against different classes, etc. But do the students actually know what data is being harvested from them when they're using these games? And also, of course, they're very addictive. So when they're focused on getting to the end of whatever the next level is to improve their reading, writing and maths, what other aspects of their health and well-being are potentially being neglected? It's pretty bad. And of course, they're using AI, the data harvesting. Michael knows more about this kind of stuff than me, but as a teacher, I hate the thought of students being exploited in this way, especially the students that are already vulnerable, behind in their schoolwork, wanting to get on, seeing a Western kind of culture of education and wanting to succeed and being misled in some ways about how they're being
100%. So
exploited.
before I talk about that for very briefly, you know, I've just looked up and I've done the math using World Bank data. Those 4 sub-Saharan countries have a combined GDP of $98.5 billion. 98.5 billion.
Mm.
That website suggested that $10,000 billion are lost because children aren't going to school.
Yeah,
But the country's combined GDP is 98.5
yeah,
billion,
yeah,
and they're saying 10,000 billion. Come
Yeah.
on, that's complete fracking bullshit. Now, one of the things that I've found that the West has done a great job of over the years, and I'm talking about centuries, is use places like Africa, not just to harvest their resources, but to experiment on them. Whether it's Gates and testing out vaccines, or whether it's using, you know, building concentration camps during the Boer War, or whatever it is, tools of oppression and control, tools of propaganda. It's like these developing countries are used as test beds where they fine tune and home in, you know, their techniques, military or civilian, to then use on their domestic populations later on. Whether it's, for example, AI, face recognition, drone technology targeting in Palestine, which will then one day come here to the West. So getting kids to game in Africa using, you know, really unethical practices under the guise of charity, and then learn from it and then adopt it back home. Do you see what I
Yeah.
mean? It's quite sinister.
Yeah, it is. It's very sinister. Yeah. So on the subject of, shall I share my screen again?
Yeah.
On the subject of the vaccines and the exploitation, the next one we're going to talk about is Freedom Fund. And so the Freedom Fund, basically the aim of the Freedom Fund is to end modern slavery. So ending modern slavery is I'm not disputing that is a great objective to have, but when you know that it's funded by the Clinton Foundation, you can start to ask questions about what their true motives might be. So yeah, they're looking into human trafficking. They're also funded by Bezos and the Swiss banking group that we just talked about, Credit Suisse, etc. And the Clinton Foundation and pharmaceutical companies are involved in this as well. So Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson are involved in partnering with a pseudo charity that aims to end modern slavery. Now, you might ask yourself the question why that might be. Well, it seems from reading the literature that basically what they're doing is identifying potential victims of the human trafficking, and then they can offer them a digital ID, because that will keep them safe, gentlemen. If you've got a digital ID, you will be safe from being trafficked, because they can locate you at any point and they can make sure that you're not going to be carried off and taken advantage of at whatever age.
Wow.
So when somebody's got a digital ID, they become a product, right? They can be given some free healthcare, including a certain safe and effective healthcare product. And they can be sent on a pathway, to work for a certain company, taking part in a certain economy. There's a lot of volunteers that work in these charities, right? They genuinely believe that they're doing a good thing. And I don't want to knock that, because some people don't know that they can't see the bigger picture. But if the volunteers of the Freedom Fund, who are working in war zones and, highly isolated, dangerous places, it can be difficult to get products, healthcare products, to them. So how do you think they're going to get their next generation vaccines to these isolated communities where these people need to be kept safe? Send in the drones. Send in the drones. Drones are very much part of the vaccine, increasing access to healthcare and monitoring people who perhaps need to be helped, in inverted commas. So yeah, it links back to the US military making vaccines, healthcare interventions of all kinds, monitoring them. If you look up medical countermeasures, you'll see some of the stuff that Michael and I have been looking at in terms of the next generation. And definitely there is exploitation of these kinds of communities. So that's pretty dark, to be honest. The Elmer Relief Foundation, which I think is connected to the Freedom Fund.
Can I just say something? I've quickly looked up the Freedom Fund website, and they've published literally over 100 research papers. I found one about Brazil, and their focus on reasons why people are undocumented. And it talks about documentation, and the documentation might get lost. It's not legally entitled by the local government. It's about having received the documentation and they lost it or it was taken away, have access to documentation. Minority groups who are persecuted by the state, people evading laws and regulations, for example, involved in illicit trades or working. It's all about documentation.
Yes, and there's a couple of interviews online where one of the founders of Legatum, I forget which guy it was now, but he's actually promoting the idea of having a digital currency, because of course a lot of these people don't have a bank account, and that's an opportunity for an investment bank if they want to provide a digital currency equivalent for some of these people that already have a digital ID, because they've been identified as at risk and they need to be kept safe.
I think what all this shows is, look, they might all be doing this. Like, they've got all the money in the world, they've got their yachts, and they just want to give back. They want to give back and be good people. I once had a patient who said, what I said, what do you do? He's in his 70s. He goes, I'm on the board of this, I'm on the board of this charity, I do this and I do that. I went, oh wow, you're very busy. It doesn't sound like you've retired. He went, Ahmed, the truth is I worked in the city and I did awful stuff for about 50 years. And now I've got a lot of money and I regret what I did and I want to give back and help. And you reach an age where you kind of think, what was the purpose? Why did I do all this? And I was like, oh wow, that's very honest of you. So maybe these people are like this. Maybe they're like, we've raped and the world and we've taken all this money. Maybe we need to give back a little bit. So I mean, I'm just saying, it could be that.
It is definitely that. Yeah, there is an element of that. Yeah.
I'm such a good person and look how much I gave away and I'm such a decent human being. But then part of it is also, what are these large multinational global corporations who are faceless entities, cold-hearted bodies, doing investing in this kind of stuff? Either it's because, like you said, it's greenwashing. It's like, look how good we are, and it's basically their idea of virtue signaling, and these people are capitalizing off it, and the desire of globalist companies to virtue signal. Or there's a hidden agenda and they're thinking, how can we manipulate this to our own agenda and profit from it? Or maybe it's all of the above. Could be
Totally.
all of the above. All right, keep going.
So moving down, we've got the End Fund. So the End Fund aims to end common diseases in Africa. This made me smile when I first saw this, because on the front page of their annual report was the success that they'd had with ivermectin in African communities where people were suffering from various parasites. And that was the time when we couldn't get hold of ivermectin. It was banned, being confiscated for our borders, etc. So that made me smile a bit.
So back to ivermectin, there's a lot of things going on. People saying it's a genocidal killer, it's an anti-fertility thing, it's killing people. I just don't know. Right, look, I can tell you a personal story. One of my daughters has had worms, and we've done the worm treatment 3 times now. It's come and gone and it keeps coming back. None of the other kids have got it. So we gave ivermectin, second-line treatment. It's got rid of the problem. Right, just 1 dose. So I'm just very wary of, I just don't know, like some people are like, oh no, ivermectin is big pharma and it's killing people and it's infertility. We're talking about like 1 dose, like literally 1 dose, and then 2 weeks later,
My take on it, and it links to the research that I've done on the Black Professor Angus Dalgleish is involved with, for instance, is about this whole competitive war that's going on around off-label drugs. Because, of course, once they're out of patent, there's no more profit to be made. So, and my take on the End Fund is that, you know, ivermectin is just one small part of what they actually call the world's largest privately funded intervention in public health. That's what they claim. I don't know how true that is, but that's a pretty big claim to make if it's unsubstantiated. So my take is that they're using things like ivermectin to get into a certain community, to maybe build up trust with the local authorities that are all corrupt, etc. And then they'll build on that. What they often quote in their literature and in their interviews is this idea of scaling up. Okay, so they'll go into a country, they'll have a very small pilot study, they'll test and test and test again, you know, to make sure that the outcomes are what they want and that the methodology is acceptable to their investors, and then they'll scale up. And I think something like offering something like ivermectin costs pennies, is freely distributed. People aren't going to get sick from it, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But even if it's a placebo, they gain trust and then they build on that in order to add value to meet their KPIs through things like vaccines and digital health options. And, you know, I mean, a lot of the work that the End Fund does, for instance, is cataracts. Very quick operation. I don't know a lot about that, but I understand that it's relatively cheap and quick and obviously very effective if you're giving back somebody their sight. So that again would be a way in terms of gaining that respectability, that trust, and then going in for the kill. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows what they're doing?
I mean, I look at the website and I go, well, that's good stuff they're doing. I mean, honestly, I look at it and I go, that's fantastic. Get rid of all these horrible diseases. What's wrong with that? Doesn't seem like there's any agenda, but then I guess maybe that's how they trap you, isn't it? And who we are, the board. Yeah, you got straight away Alan McCormack, partner Legatum. Don't know who this guy is. And then there's some people you just think, you know, co-owner Winston Wachter Fine Art Gallery. Oh, Impact Thread, Executive Director, Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Oh, you got someone who's director of the Neglected Tropical Diseases Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in there. Interesting.
Gavi is a constant theme. Gates, Gavi, DigiHealth, ID Insights, which is also another data harvesting kind of digital health company.
So they could be doing good work. Like I said, it's like multifactorial. They have multiple gains. They could be doing some good work, but it's not all altruistic. There's other hidden agendas and gains for them behind the scenes.
That's
building
right.
a reputation, building goodwill, experimenting, exploiting, enriching, God knows what.
Now, something that surprised me when I was looking at the main partners of the End Fund is the Moondance Foundation. Have you heard of them before?
No, I'm not into that kind of stuff.
They're actually, well, they're based in Wales, right? So they helped with the furlough payments during lockdown. So the fund originates from floating the Admiral Insurance Group. Do you remember when they floated on the stock exchange? 2004 that was, I do remember that. So I'm totally confused as to why they would be a Legatum funder on the End Fund. That doesn't seem to make sense to me, but maybe someone can throw some light on that. So moving swiftly on to the next tentacle, this one is the Media and Religions and Politics, which is very busy and incorporates the ARC that is the theme of our conversation. So this is covering all the bases, right? Making sure that the censorship happens, making sure the propaganda is pumped out as regularly as possible from multiple different platforms. So, yeah, Unheard, a popular one. Freddie Sayers, isn't it? That's presenting that. So his from the Spectator. Again, that was founded by Paul Marshall, the Unheard, and a similar set of directors. If you look at the directors of Unheard, it's a similar set of directors between lots of these companies, right? So if you look at GB News and Unheard, it links up to the same kind of names: Reform, Reclaim the Media, The Spectator, and ARC, which Michael will talk about later. And there's also sort of subsidiaries of those that are think tanks, kind of pushing the narrative from a different angle, including the church groups. So there's various churches that are involved in, and that was a common theme of ARC, wasn't it? It was like this Christian principles. We've got to reclaim God in our lives, and we've got to be. This is a spiritual war, etc., etc. So that sort of that captures another audience in some ways.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been very successful, I think, or especially in America, is capturing good, God-fearing Christians into the whole Zionist and capitalist, globalist agenda. These are just good people, I mean, I would argue Zionism captured good, decent Jewish people. I mean, these things are all about capturing good people without actually knowing that they're serving an agenda. Like the leadership, they're not Christians. I'm sure Trump, he's very vague about whether he's a Christian or not. But the leadership, I mean, there's some that are. I think Vance is, but I'm just saying they've captured the conservative evangelical Christian group, and these are just good people trying to do the right thing and resisting wokery and DEI and all the other nonsense
well,
they're saying.
I mean, one of the prominent, what they call thought leaders, in the so-called fake freedom movement, whatever you want to call it, Calvin, the priest guy that was on GB News and friendly with Lawrence Fox, and it's they know that they've got a following, these people, and so they're very strategic. A bit like the Russian guy, Michael, what was his name? Was very entertaining, and in ARC, he was
Konstantin Kissing.
Constantine, yeah, that was, it's very, very clever. This propaganda is incredibly complex and very, very clever and very complex and very overlapping. But as I say, there's only a few people involved in all of these multiple companies.
Talking about Calvin, can I show you something? Just unshare your screen, will you, for a second?
Yeah. I don't really know much about Calvin, so I can't.
Yeah.
I can't comment too much on him. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, I can't comment too much either. But I always think it's interesting. So I said, hey, hello, Calvin. Could you please come on my podcast? I think we would have a very interesting conversation. I agree and disagree with many things that you say. It will make for a lively chat. You up for it? Response: depends what you'd want to discuss, sir. I said your life story, GB incident, immigration, Christianity, Islam. And he said, I think I'll give it a miss, thank you.
Yeah.
I said, that's a shame. Can I ask you why? I just don't feel called to it. I wish you well, but I don't think it's for me. And it's just like, that's interesting for someone who's at a mission trying to promote and talk about certain things.
Yeah.
Why don't you want to come on?
Yeah.
Just interesting. I've got a queue of people who want to come on. He's all about the public life and spreading his message.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to come and speak to my very large audience and spread your message? Interesting.
Yeah. So there's lots of examples of that kind of person, that thought leader.
What I'm trying to say is there's a group of people that stay within a very safe space where they go to on each other's shows, and they all work together. It's like networks. I will never be allowed on certain networks. Michael Ginsberg is never going to go on certain networks and platforms. Ursula's never going to, because we're off script. We're not saying, we're wild cards. We might just say things that are just not acceptable. Like last time I went on GB News when some junior producer forgot who I am and invited me on to trash the NHS. And instead, I didn't. And instead, I told Nigel Farage to his face that isn't Reform Party just part of the Uni Party? It's all the Uni Party. And he never said no. He never, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've written a little bit about that. So these media, basically all sorts of right-leaning, sitting on the fence, pseudo-alternative media, similar to Toby Young's Free Speech Union, which incidentally has a branch in New Zealand. So these protagonists define themselves as thought leaders and freedom fighters to seek approval from a disillusioned audience, but without explicitly talking about the elephant in the room, as I'm sure Michael will go into.
So why do you say that about Toby Young? I mean, that's quite a statement, you know, pseudo whatever. That's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Well, I've met him personally. I asked him about academic free speech, and he didn't seem to have any understanding of the complexities of what that subject means.
But his ignorance doesn't mean anything malign. It's just
No, but
it's
what
a
I'm saying
blind
is
spot.
because people like him, and it's not just him, as you've just pointed out about Calvin, because they're not willing to engage in any conversation about it, that is a red flag, really. That's one element of, if you're not curious and you don't want to learn and you don't even want to engage in any conversation about it, and that is your job, you know, that is Toby Young's Free Speech Union's job, to learn about free speech, you know, in the Free Speech Union, then it's something not right about it. There's something inauthentic about it, and it's not helpful to people.
I found that certain of these people, right-wing leaning populist people, they'll focus a lot about, for example, the migrants coming in, the loss of culture of the West, the need to do something, and the failure of the existing politicians. Very populist, and to be honest, in fairness, a lot of what they say isn't actually wrong, is actually
No,
quite
that's right.
but they kind of like inflame the situation and get us whipped up and angry at the wrong person. So I wouldn't be angry at little Billy Bilal, who's come over in the boat, who's his family's been bombed in some country, and you know what, he's been told come over to the West, and he's been funneled by some NGO, some Soros organization or whatever, and has ended up in the shores of the UK being exploited here. Yeah, I wouldn't be angry with him. What I'd be angry is, who are the NGOs and the UN and the Kalergi program and all the other thing, the multi-billion-dollar human trafficking that's going on. I'd be angry at our countries for bombing and destroying nation states to the smithereens where there's open slave markets. I'd be upset at what our governments are doing in our name when actually they're just globalist mercantile forces causing chaos. And the plan is to create chaos so they can do resource extraction and never have a stable country that can resist the basically neo-colonial forces. That's the agenda that's going on. And these right-wing populist people never ever call out that. They never talk about the bigger picture. They just point their finger at Billy Bilal and say Billy Bilal is a rapist and a thug and a stupid Neanderthal and uncultured and sexually deviant. And you know, it might be true. Like, it might be true. But my view of the world is actually there's good people and bad people everywhere. Like, there are scum everywhere. There's white scum, brown scum, yellow scum. There's racist people in every color. There are bad people in every religion. But most people are good. And it's not, and evil is not confined to any one group of people. The Jews haven't got a monopoly on evil. The Muslims haven't got a monopoly on evil. But these right-wing figures will make it look like, you know, I think Constantine said in his first Ark speech, the barbarians are not at the gate, they're within our walls, or something along those lines. And it's like, you know,
lighting.
Talk about emotional language and, you know, getting us all, and what they create is this divide and rule. So we're all angry at each other, all pointing fingers at each other. And yeah, you know, it's just like, what the heck, man?
Yeah.
By the way, Michael, I just want to say you're like a fake, you know, Jew. You're browner than me, man. I meant to be the brown guy. I'm sure you're browner than me. Like,
And I'm an Eastern European, so imagine that. Oh, see, I don't even want to go there, man. That's a rabbit hole all to itself. We can do a 4-hour podcast on that. Easy.
Done. We'll book that later. Anyway,
I'm nearly at the end, so I just want to, you know, just touch on the last couple of tentacles, if that's all right, of the Legatum Empire. So,
yeah, and then Michael can jump into Ark and the structure of Ark and the people behind and I really want him to talk about like Jordan Peterson. And I just want to say, Michael, I love you. Thank you for being so patient. By the way, I really appreciate it. Right, carry on, Ursula.
You're a star. Okay, so as we just said about the media, basically they never talk about the elephant in the room. They're just picking off the easy subjects so that they know that they're going to get approval. They're puppets, political puppets, basically. They wouldn't ever present evidence from the Scottish COVID inquiry or the UK excess deaths or interviews with the lesser known freedom fighters. And they wouldn't ever talk about the current military countermeasures that have been developed for the next pandemic. And it struck me, I think it's worth saying that when Douglas Murray was talking at ARC the other day, he thought he was entertaining the audience by actually joking about the do not resuscitate orders that the NHS had in place over the COVID era, and the audience laughed, which was absolutely sickening to hear, to be honest. So the media empire is linked to the Democracy Fund, and that's very closely related to this media, the objectives of the media, which is, citizens should get more involved. And, it's incompetence. The government just made mistakes. And if you get involved, you can get into Parliament and you can fix everything and everything will be fine. And it's just bullshit. And Paul Marshall is very heavily engaged in that whole kind of media platforming. So briefly, the final two, which are very short, the Prosperity Index. This is really important, actually. It's a report that they publish every year. They've done it for a few years now, the Legatum group. And it's an implicit part of the Legatum Capital and Legatum Institute, in that it focuses on creating and presenting what they call measurables. So they'll look at the measurables to maintain the impact investment successes, and they'll present it in a way that looks convincing. So they're doing it through various methods, including questionnaires. They'll look at the KPIs of each country. There's 100 and something countries year on year. And then they'll come to a judgment about how prosperous each country is, looking at educational levels, jobs, salaries, standard of living. So the problem with that is, of course, it's all based on a Western economic framework. So they might not be looking at the nuanced implications of community, grassroots sort of stuff, and importance of family values and other things that make our lives worth living. So there is a bit in there about communities cohesion, but it's not prioritized. So one of the customers of the Prosperity Index is the World Economic Forum. How convenient, because obviously they need to obtain evidence that promotes their successful initiatives towards the Great Reset. And if anyone's interested in the Prosperity Index, you can download some of it for free. So you can have a look at, if you're interested in a particular country, go and have a look and see what you think of it. It will make you smile, probably, about the measurables that they try to present. And then very lastly, Legatum Capital, which is basically the center of the universe for them in terms of their investment bank itself. So that's the not so friendly looking entity from an outsider's perspective. Has its HQ based in Dubai, apparently. One of the main bases is in China. They're promoting their public good through charitable purposes, but the Legatum Capital entity itself is very connected to the WHO, and they explicitly state that their profit is through private equity investment. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
But what's wrong with private equity profit? I mean, people want to make money. That in itself isn't a bad thing, is it?
Not necessarily, no. But it's definitely leading to the public-private partnership takeover of our public sector that we're seeing, the infrastructure being bought out by commercial entities and citizens being exploited as a result of that conflicts of interest.
That's another conversation, another whole podcast series on PPP, this whole public-private partnership, which in effect is state and corporations working together, which is fascism. It's just basically crony capitalism, fascism, whichever way you want to look at it. It's very, very dangerous, I think. And what happens is what we really want in this world is small and medium-sized businesses, family-led or cooperative groups. But what we're seeing now is massive multinationals, massive monopolies, one or two or three global actors who basically do everything now. And they have such big power that they can bypass all the costly legislation and laws that are being enacted, which your small and medium-sized businesses just can't afford to tackle.
Yeah.
So they sponsor all these legal things, laws that are passed, and draconian regulations. They know that their lawyers and their teams can bypass all of them They can win the massive contracts, and they will always outcompete the smaller and medium-sized businesses. So you don't actually have true capitalism.
Gates is a classic case study of that, isn't it? Because the reason why Microsoft, my understanding of it is that the reason why Microsoft is such a global giant is basically because he made sure that the smaller companies were put out of business. And that's just a pattern that's been repeated over and over again in lots of different situations, so that we're in a situation now where there's this many corporate giants that own pretty much everything.
Yep.
And also because Gates is a made man. Look at his family.
Yeah. Anyway, any questions on any of that?
No, very happy. I'm going to stop. I'm going to go and pee. And then, Michael, if you can take over, that'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Well, listen, guys, you're doing great work. Ursula, that was a lot of work that you've put in that. I appreciate that. It takes a lot of time, linking all the webs and threads and figuring out how it works. I mean, I would still say, look, we don't really know, do we? We just don't know. All we know is a murky world. We don't know the underlying motives of people, but there could be multiple gains, and it could be that it's not quite as altruistic as it seems. I think that's what we can take away from this, that it's just very murky and very complicated. But anyway, Michael, do you want to kick off now and talk about ARC? All over to you.
Yeah, so before we get into ARC, I just want to do a little just segue from what Ursula was discussing with Legatum. And again, I mean, obviously, both Ursula and I are investigative journalists. We're researchers, so we only deal with facts. So I don't want to get too much into speculation, but I'm going to give you a little bit of tidbits of factual information, and people can think about what that means themselves. So Ursula said that Legatum was founded in 2006, which is correct, obviously, but the agenda is a lot older than that, and it is quite likely that this is a reincarnation of many previous organizations that go back many centuries. Think British East India Company. Yes, right. Now, another thing that's worth pointing out, legatum in Latin means legacy or bequest. Okay? Now, I'll let you ponder on that. Now, another thing that I guess, two things that are worth mentioning in this context, and these are, I don't want to get into speculation, so I'm only going to talk about facts. So the chief financial officer, okay, Legatum, of the actual Legatum group, the CFO, like the person managing the money, her name is Carla Veach, okay? Now, if you go to her bio, right, Carla Veach is the chief financial officer at Legatum and is responsible for the group's finances function. She joined the firm in 2008, so 2 years after it was founded, and has served in various capacities in the finance team, blah, blah, blah. What is interesting, prior to Legatum, Carla started her career in London, working as an accountant for the British royal family's private office and Hitachi. Okay? Let that sink in. Another interesting person, I mean, that is less interesting, but still interesting. So Ursula mentioned the Prosperity Index. The Prosperity Index is, I guess, collated and published by an entity called the Prosperity Institute, which is one of the entities in this massive Legatum web. The chief financial officer of that entity, Prosperity Institute, is Kate Lehman. Okay, Kate started her career with PricewaterhouseCoopers in London, working in the insurance sector in business recovery and later on consulting projects, blah, 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 blah. Then later sovereign wealth and private investment. Following a period working for the forensic investigation team at Deloitte in London, Kate took a new challenge in taking the lead finance role for broadcast media startup GB News, taking them from launch to a period of 2.5 years of rapid growth and investment. Okay? So just that kind of gives you how it's all connected. Now, if that's interesting, the next thing will be even more interesting. So Ursula mentioned that Legatum has an arm at MIT. That arm is part of the MIT Sloan School of Management, okay? Which, when I look on the website, now they've added something there. MIT Sloan is the leader in research and teaching in AI. So that's already interesting. But it gets even more interesting. Within the MIT Management Sloan School, there is a Center for Development and Entrepreneurship named after Legatum. So it's called the Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship. Obviously, the lead partner is the Legatum Group with all their various funds. The other partner is the MasterCard Foundation. And there's another blurb kind of on that page that will be very interesting, I think. The royal family of His Royal Highness Her Royal Highness, apologies, Princess Moody in Saudi Arabia is committed to supporting the Legatum Fellowship through a generous gift to the Legatum Center. Her Royal Highness Princess Moody bint Khalid Fellowships prepare citizens and long-term residents of Saudi Arabia for entrepreneurial careers that contribute to the economic and societal progress in the region. Okay, so there is a recurring theme here with royal families. Okay, enough said. That's where I'm going to end that. Okay, so yeah. Now, all right, let's go to. That was just a bit of a teaser. Okay, now let's talk about ARC. So what is ARC in essence? Okay, it's part obviously of the media web of Legatum, which is vast. But the best way to describe ARC would be it's a PR firm. It is a PR firm, one of the PR firms, but probably now the most prominent PR firm within the Legatum web. Just like the WEF is a PR firm. At the end of the day, it is a PR firm. They don't actually make any decisions, right? They don't actually execute any programs. They don't do any of that. Their objective is to drive a narrative, lead the conversation to a certain path that is desirable for the people that are behind it. So convene a messaging, right? So what you're looking at now, Ahmed, that's the advisory. Oh no, that's the list of speakers, right? Is that what you're looking at? Yeah. Oh, so the advisory board. Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about the advisory board before we get into Jordan Peterson, because that's interesting. I guess one thing to mention, obviously, Jordan Peterson is the co-founder of ARC, but he's a front man. Okay, he was recruited and brought on board because he had a very high profile amongst a certain demographic. Obviously, had a popular podcast, had sold out events all over the world talking about various values. Okay, so that's why they brought him on board. And I guess the first time that I came across Peterson and his connection with Legatum, with ARC, I should say, even though I didn't know that it was ARC at the time. I remember watching a video it's called Amazing Polly. That's what she calls herself online. And she mentioned something, and I think she played a clip. I don't remember where she sourced it from, but it was a clip of Jordan Peterson talking about the fact that in late 2022, he met with certain individuals. I think he called them wealthy individuals in the UK, apologies, during his in the UK, and they were about to embark on some major project, major initiative together, and he was very, very excited about it. He didn't mention out by name or didn't say anything like that, but those wealthy UK individuals, I think we know who they are now. Those are the people behind ARC, right, including Marshall and the people behind Legatum, obviously. So we know that now. Now, what is also interesting to note is the co-founders of ARC, together with Peterson, is a very, very interesting couple. It's the Baroness Philippa Stroud, okay, and her husband, whose name is, let me see if I can remember that. Her husband is David. So David and Philippa Stroud, right? So she's a baroness. I understand that she's heavily involved in, or used to be involved in, conservative UK politics. What is also interesting, that they are both evangelical Christians, right? And they are, I think they're like literally preachers, or at least I think maybe one of them, maybe David, but I think David definitely, but I think Philippa as well. So they are very active in a church called Holy Trinity Brompton. Okay, I don't know how familiar you are with them, but keep that in mind that they are evangelical Christians. Now, if you know a little bit about the evangelical Christians in the US, it's kind of the same in the UK. They have a very particular view on the world, around end times and the Jews returning to the promised land as part of the end times, and a lot of their support, very ardent support to Zionism, comes from those religious beliefs. Okay, So that's worth keeping in mind. Now, before we get into Jordan Peterson, let's talk about some of the interesting members of the advisory board. Okay? So the advisory board, you've already scrolled through that. The advisory board, one of the founding members of the advisory board is John Howard. Okay, long-time former Australian Prime Minister. He was the Prime Minister, amongst other things, during the Port Arthur massacre, after which there was a significant change to gun laws in Australia, where basically people were not allowed to have guns. There's a lot of, I guess, conspiracies and rumors about what actually happened there, about the perpetrators. I won't get into that. More importantly, he obviously got Australia involved in everything that, the US did since 9/11, specifically Iraq and Afghanistan. And for his great service to, the American empire, not so much for the Australian people, he received the Medal of Freedom, right, from George W. Bush. That was, I think, literally on his second last or last day in office. And interestingly enough, there was another person who received a Medal of Freedom at the same time from the same president on the same day, and that was Tony Blair. So that's interesting. Another member of the ARC Advisory Board is Mike Johnson, current Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. He had a lot of interesting views about both Ukraine and Israel, but it is safe to say that he's Zionist leaning, let's just say that. Vivek Ramaswamy, again, one of the members. Again, there's a lot of that's a whole discussion about like the background of Vivek Ramaswamy, but it's pretty obvious that he's also a made man. He's made his money in biotech and pharma, okay, and then he created an investment fund that is designed to be anti-war. So basically, invests in anything that is not war, right? And then obviously he ran for president. Then he was supposed to be Musk's sidekick in Doge, and now he's running for, I think, governor of Ohio, right? So he's running for office as well. Now, another one that will be
Also, doesn't his brother own some biotech company, and his brother is linked to Peter Thiel or someone else? I can't remember.
He's linked to Peter Thiel.
It's all linked. It's all linked.
Yeah, he's linked to Peter Thiel. Yeah.
Okay.
So Peter Thiel, I think maybe actually not Peter Thiel. I think he was a Soros fellow, like he himself. Okay. Another interesting one that will be familiar to a lot of people who are on Substack, that's Michael Schellenberger. So he initially was one of the people that was handpicked by Elon Musk to release the Twitter files. Okay. And also ran twice for the position of governor of California in 2018 as a Democrat, and then again in 2022 as an independent. Neil Ferguson, Scottish-American historian. I think, yeah. Basically, there's a lot to say about him, but one of the things that he did during the pandemic, yes, I'm sure you know about it more than I do. I'm living in the UK. He basically criticized the UK government for not going harder and faster with lockdowns and anti-COVID measures, right? And he did some predictions that were obviously proven complete nonsense. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I need to add much about that. I think you've discussed him many, many times, but he's on the advisory committee as well. Now, here's one that would be very, very interesting. There's a lady there. Her name is Riva Melissa. Now, the ARC website says that Tez has a background in technology and finance, including co-founding an AI-focused venture fund and as an angel investor. She's currently, that was last year, so it probably changed. She's currently working closely with Praxis on building a city. Now that city, Praxis Smart City, is actually a smart city powered by crypto. Even more interesting, Tez, okay, is openly and very, very proudly transhumanist, right? She's spoken at major transhumanist conferences. And since 2015, she was a member of the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technology, so IEET, which is probably the most prominent openly transhumanist think tank. Now, they describe her as an entrepreneur, writer, philosopher, and life extension activist. Another interesting thing, she acted as a strategic advisor for some obscure political party in the US called the Transhumanist Party. The name of the party is the Transhumanist Party. So I don't know if I can say more about that. Now, in 2016, Forbes, which we know is a globalist front, okay, published a piece about her, glowing, kind of adoration piece, where they talk about how Tez transformed herself, and I'm quoting, from a homeless person to an AI pioneer, right? Okay, so that's some of the people that sit on the advisory board. Now, where do you want me to go next? Do you want me to go to?
Dude, oh my God. I mean, like, literally, a humanist
Yep.
activist
Yep.
is on, not just a guest speaker, is on the advisory board of ARC. So, all you people listening out there who think that Michael Ginsburg is black-pilled, Ursula's black-pilled, Doc Malik is cyanide-pilled, ARC is, it's got our heroes in it. You know, they're leading the charge against the globalists. Just chillax. Have a look at the people on the advisory board. Just scratch the surface. Just Google their names and see what comes up. Transhumanist. Jeez Louise. So who's the transhumanist on the WEF side? Klaus Schwab's right hand man. What's his name? You know the name.
Harari, yeah.
Yeah, so he's a transhumanist on the WEF side, and now we got a little transhumanist on this side. Ain't that funny? All right, keep going, buddy. You're doing great work. Despite being a Mossad agent. I mean, you really are a shit Mossad agent.
You're gonna get me in trouble. Anyway, I have enough trouble as it is just with my last name. Jesus. Anyway, all right. Okay, so let's talk about Jordan Peterson. I mean, there's so much to talk about Jordan Peterson. I don't even know where to start. There's a lot that we've covered in the original.
Talking about your surname, are you related to Dr. Ginsburg?
Which one?
The guy in Moscow that rolled out the vaccines.
I am not. No relation to the Fauci of Russia. No, I know. Not to the best of my knowledge, at least. Oh God, yes. Okay. Now let's where can I start about Peterson? I guess let's talk about the stuff that is most obvious. All right. So I've got a few visual audio-visual aids here. So here's the thing. In late October 2016, Peterson gave an interview to a podcast called The Dark Room. Okay, so that's 2016. Now, let's have a listen to what he said. Just let me know if the sound comes okay.
Yeah, I can hear it. Go for it.
So, a brief introduction. Meeting or no. So, just a brief introduction about yourself. You know, do many things, but if you can describe yourself.
Well, I'm a professor at the University of Toronto so far. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have an clinical practice. I'm a business consultant. I do executive coaching mostly for
Listen carefully now.
law firms. I run a testing business for the world's biggest early stage technology incubator in California called the Founder Institute. They've started 2,000 businesses in the last 5 years. I meet all 30,000 of their entrants because I know how to predict entrepreneurial ability. I designed a program called Future Authoring that has helped more than 7,000 university students improve their grades by 25% and decrease the dropout by about the same amount. I worked on the UN Secretary General's High Panel for Sustainability. The report was delivered in, I believe, 2013, and rewrote the underlying narrative to strip out most of the ideological claptrap.
Yeah, you got that?
Wow.
Okay, you got that. Okay, good. All right, so let's rock and roll now. All right. So what is that report that he's talking about? Okay, so he said that he was involved in some report, UN report in 2013, and he removed most of the claptrap, as he calls it. Okay, so what is that report? The report is called A New Global Partnership, Eradicate Poverty and Transform Economies Through Sustainable Development. The report of the high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda, released May 2013 by the United Nations. Okay? Now, that document is available on the original article about ARC that Ursula and I published. But one of the interesting things there is when you do a search for social and environmental, right, you will see it appear 12 times in the document. Now, well, some of the things that you find there are, most seriously, the MDGs, right, fell short by not integrating the economic, social, and environmental, some MDGs is Millennium Development Goals, that's what came before the SDG, fell short by not integrating the economic, social, and environmental aspect of sustainable development as envisaged in the Millennium Declaration, okay? One other thing, I mean, that can go on and on, but basically, we also encourage incorporation of social and environmental metrics into accounting practices. This should be part of any sustainable development agenda, even if there were no concerns over rising global temperatures. Okay? It recommends that an international conference should take up in more detail the question of finance for sustainable development.
So hold on, Jordan Peterson wrote this.
So, again, I want to make it very, very clear. He did not write this, but he removed all the claptrap, right? He did the final editing of the final draft before publication based on his own admission in his own voice and image.
So basically, if you're doing that, you must be happy with putting your name to it. You must be happy or in agreement with what's being said or done. I would never put my name to something I disagree with. I would never publicly say, yeah, I removed all the claptrap. You know, by the way, it's a rubbish document. I don't want to be associated with it. You don't do that. You must agree with what's in the document. And the sustainability goals are basically the globalist agenda of how to introduce the technocracy and the one world government. That's what it is. All of these DEI, ESG quotas that have infiltrated companies. This is how they've manipulated. This is how I lost my job, by the way, because I was going against all their ESG, DEI. It was nothing personal. It's just like, you know what? We need to get rid of this troublemaker. Otherwise, we're going to have problems with loans and interest rates and banking and whatnot. This is what they're doing.
Yep. Now, just to add to that, I'm not going to play that second video, but in November 2020, he did a talk. So that's November 2020 now. And he kind of briefly touched about his involvement with the UN, right? With that same involvement, where he said that he wasn't paid, but he learned a lot. And he said all the right-wing conspiracy theorists are going to have a go at him for basically pick. No, sorry. He said all the right-wing conspiracy theorists are going to pick up on that he worked for the UN. Okay.
So listen. I've got some listeners, maybe even some of my supporters, who'll be like, Michael, Ahmed, listen, he's a good guy. He spoke out against all the trans thing. He got punished. He lost his professorship. He had to go on some remedial course. He's one of the good guys. He can make mistakes. He can do the wrong thing. Look, Ahmed, you took one shot. You made mistakes. Don't point fingers. From glass houses. You don't know. People can change. I mean, I know my opinion about that. Like, just because I had one shot under coercion doesn't mean I've been pushing an agenda on other people. But do you think Jordan Peterson just happened to make some mistakes? He's a changed man, and
Let's say he made a mistake. He's still involved with ARC now. And when we we talk about what ARC is actually about, he's the co-founder. Like, he's one of the named co-founders, together with this weird couple with some very interesting.
Did he say, take the goddamn shot?
Yes, I believe he has. And I believe he also said something to Netanyahu when he started bombing in Gaza, let him have it, or something along those lines. But hey, he probably made a mistake there too. He's a good guy.
Didn't he say, give them hell or something?
Something like that, yes. I believe so.
Sounds like a nice guy. I love about whether it's Jordan Peterson or Trump or any other person who certain people have faith in. On one side, they'll say they're the most intelligent, smart person playing 5D chess. They're a gifted orator. They've got a great personality. They're funny. They're amazing. But equally, at the same time, they're flawed. They're human. They make mistakes, and you have to forgive them. So they're both smart and intelligent and amazing and thinking 10 steps ahead of us. But equally, at the same time, they've made mistakes and they're only human. I mean, can't people see that they're just contradicting each other? Like, which one is it? Is this person an amazing, intelligent authority figure who's been consistently right, or are they someone who gets things really badly wrong and does U-turns? Like, pick one.
You make mistake once or twice. I mean, one time is a mistake. 2 times is intent, in my opinion. 3 times, definitely.
I'm just saying, like, you, me, Ursula. I mean, wouldn't we love it if people gave us the benefit of the doubt and cut us slack like some of these big figures? And we haven't even done any of these type of transgressions. Any transgressions we've done are so minor, but if anytime we trip up or make a mistake, you'll be like, look at you. But these people who make massive transgressions and errors, there's always excuses made for them. It's always like, oh, no. I just find it quite interesting. The bigger the transgression, the bigger the error, the bigger the mistake, the more forgiveness these people seem to be getting. It's interesting.
Look at Trump. Anyway, we won't even go there, but yeah, all right. So you asked me who actually wrote the report. Now, that's actually interesting. Here's a little something I prepared earlier. All right, here we go. Now let me know if you can see that picture.
Yes.
These are the people that actually wrote the report. Now, you may recognize a few familiar names here, definitely.
David Cameron. David Cameron's there. Yeah.
Now, do you recognize this guy?
No idea.
No? Heard of some guy called John Podesta?
Yeah. Podesta Files? Podesta
Yes.
Pizzagate?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding you. This is from the website of the... Yeah, no. Now, do you know who that is?
No. She looks like a Barbie
That's
doll.
Queen Rania of Jordan.
What?
Yes. So she sits on, obviously, on the WEF advisory board, and her specific role, she heads the selection committee for the Young Global Leaders Program. Let's see what else.
Shut up.
Now, so we had David Cameron, we had Queen Rania of Jordan, we had, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, she's Nigerian.
No, I can do it. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
Good on you, mate. Thank you. So she's a WF agenda contributor, okay? At the time, she was very, very keen to make sure that everyone, including people in her country, get a shot. But now she's actually the head of the World Trade Organization.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so she's been promoted.
Good for her.
And John Podesta. As I said, I am not even going there. All right? So that's the actual author of the document. Interesting, isn't it? All right. Now, what are we going to do next? Okay, so I said that ARC is a PR arm right now. And that's something that, I kind of got into a discussion on Substack with, and he made a valid point that, he was there and it didn't seem like a call to him and all that sort of stuff, which is a valid point, right? That's fine. But a PR firm doesn't target the people in the room.
Yeah, I've also been to lots of cult seminars and conferences, and you know what's really funny? You never see the word cult anywhere.
Of course not. Obvious. Yes.
That was a joke, by the way.
Okay. So obviously a PR firm, anyone who worked in a PR firm or a marketing agency knows that the audience is not the people in the room. The people in the room are props, if anything, right? They're there to clap and cheer. It's like a TV audience, right? The target audience is the people who watch this stuff, right? Outside the room. And those people are almost always online. So let's see some of the marketing that the PR firm ARC, known as ARC, right, has produced. So this is the promo video. Let me get that so we can see that. So that's the official promo video for ARC 2025.
We have the responsibility to face an uncertain future with faith.
We are convinced that decline is not inevitable, that there is a compelling, hope-filled vision for the future. But we know that it's not only the time to renew our civilization, but that it is possible to renew our civilization.
From the dawn of time, human beings have had to work to make the world a better place.
We're doing this at scale in our stadium event in London in February with 4,000 people gathering.
I am only what I say I am, and I can define myself completely. The ultimate extension of a narcissistic liberalism.
We're here to talk about the fragmentation of society and the future.
To explore what good governance might really look like and how free markets and human innovation can be combined with good governance to ensure human flourishing. Could we not have a future of unlimited abundance and opportunity for everyone? Is it not possible that we could aim at that? That is what we could have if we chose to do it.
The family is the building block of society. The family breakdown has become epidemic. We need to harness the power of technology to serve and not subvert the human being.
We split the atom, we spliced the genome, and we connected the world through microcomputers that fit in our pockets, that allow us to do amazing things.
Reliable energy, affordable energy, and low emissions energy. There are trade-offs in this very real world that we have to work with and deal with. Wouldn't that be nice if we could just have some civil dialogue?
We have the capacity, if we conduct ourselves properly, to make the best of anything that presents itself to us, to make the very desert bloom. We're sovereign citizens. We have responsibility for our own destinies. If we take that on, there's nothing we can't do.
This is my plea. to be engaged, to man your station.
Welcome aboard the Ark.
Now you have a bit of authority, like you have a bit of experience on that, Ahmed. Like obviously with your personal background. I mean, what's your opinion as a promotional video for a potential cult?
Yeah, I think that's really, really slick. And I totally agree with you. That whole audience there is to build authority. So imagine they were just speaking to themselves or an empty room. People watch that and go, who the fuck are these people? But you got 4,000 people around these dinner tables in smart suits. You're like, wow. So when you want to manipulate people's minds and get them to get into a cult, one of the first things you do is build authority. You want to come across as an authority figure, and you want to get people who would normally not agree to something to agree to something. So you frame certain questions like, like first of all, you and I will come to an agreement. Like, Michael, don't you think it's important that we look after this planet? Now you're not going to say no to that. So now straight away you're in agreement with me. So we're on board. We're on the same side. So then I get to be your friend. I talk to you in a very personable manner. So, I go, Michael, tell me about yourself. Like, what are your hardships? I've heard that, life's a bit difficult. Are you finding that too? Now I'm relating to you. Now suddenly the stranger is your friend. I'm close to you. We're agreeing on certain things. So I've brought you along. So the next time I'm going to start introducing concepts that you're going to go along with. And it's known from experiments that it's all about conformity. Human beings want to go with the group, with the herd. So now you have a room full of 4,000 people, the best of the best. I want to be part of that. Like, there's slick video, beautiful shots, cinematic, people charismatic, famous, cool. Jordan Peterson is so cool. He says so many cool things. I'm on board with this. So it's all about manufacturing your consent to go along with their agenda, basically. That's what I would say. Now, before you quickly move on to that comment or what I've just said, I just want to screen share. It's always in your face. So do you know who this character is on the right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's that character?
That's from Batman, Harry Two-Face.
Harvey Two-Face.
Two-Face, apologies, yes.
I mean, it's in the name, isn't it? Two-Face.
Yep.
Now, what does Two-Face mean to you? When I say Two-Face, someone was two-faced, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's appearing as one thing, but it's actually something else. Pretty simple.
It's always in your fracking face, Michael. It's always in your face. But we choose not to see it. And it goes back to that experiment. I don't know if you know, there's an experiment with 3 lines and one was shorter. And people were brought in, all actors, and one wasn't an actor. And all the actors were told to pick the longest line to say that this was the shortest. And the one person who wasn't an actor chose the longest line when asked which one is the shortest. I mean, I might have botched it all up, but I'm just giving the rough idea of the experiment. And even though his eyes said, no, this is the longest, they said, yes, it's the shortest, because everyone else went along. And what I'm trying to say is human beings think, no, we can't be tricked. We can't be manipulated. No. That other idiot is the version. I'll be the 1 in 100 who will not fall for it. Yeah, the guy's on stage wearing a split suit like Harvey Two-Face. He's telling you to your face, and no one is seeing it. And it's like, duh. Anyway, you asked me a question. What do you think of my answer? Was it reasonable?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So you were impressed. I think you're going to love the next one. Now, keep in mind, and thank you, Ursula, for reminding me. So it helps when one of the co-founders is a clinical psychologist and the other co-founder is an evangelical preacher, right? Now, the Strouds, they're involved in something, and thank you for that, Ursula, kind of on the fly here. They're involved in something called the Evangelical Alliance. So they are in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and their tagline is "Together Making Jesus Known." Interesting, isn't it?
What's wrong with that? There'll be a lot of Christians getting great.
Jesus is great, no problem there. But then you'll see how that you need a certain public speaking skill and ability to be a preacher, especially an evangelical preacher, because it's a very specific type of service, right?
Like, praise the Lord.
Yes. So that leads us to the next video that I want to show, and that's the video that ARC published as a recap of day 1 of this year's conference. Okay, so let's see if I can get that going. One second. That you're gonna love that one. If you like the previous one, you're gonna love that one. All right, Let's rock and roll.
From the nations of the world. Because those of us who love our nations and who love the principles and values on which it is founded know that there is something that is wrong. From 96 countries, from the east, the west, the north and the south, from hundreds of professions and across every sector and walk of life, you have come. We're coming together to decide what is to be done.
It's a core part of our mission to get our story straight. We have the opportunity to make the foundational principles of our civilization conscious, explicit, and in so doing, to pave the way for a genuine and mutually appreciative union of traditional conservatism and classic liberalism.
It's time for us to remember these timeless principles that will equip us for the journey ahead.
And not let the narcissistic world take over your soul. If we want to be happier people, and we want to live in a happier society, it comes down to these four. Your faith, your family, your friendship, and your work. Those are the four.
Children need love, attention, parental presence, and parental sacrifice in the early years. Parents who treasure them above work or any other endeavors. Or they forever spend their adult lives trying to compensate, to fill the void, and to reclaim the admiration and love they never received.
And the more economic freedom a nation has, the more prosperity it creates.
We need to unleash freedom, opportunity, and energy. And ARC has been a tremendous platform to spread this message.
We can choose to follow a narrative of decline, but we will end up fulfilling it. Or we can choose a pro-human, optimistic, hope-filled vision.
This cultural unmooring may be the most profound reason why we are not all thriving in the kind of world of capitalism with love you heard from our previous speaker.
It was Marx who believed that by stealing a nation's history, you could steal that nation. At ARC, we believe it is time to claim back what has been stolen.
Western civilization is in crisis. This is not a crisis of values. It's a crisis of confidence that has set in at exactly the same time that we face existential threats.
What made the West and what made our nations great must now guide us once again. In this civilizational moment, will we choose renewal, replacement, or decline?
It's time to rebuild. Welcome aboard the ARC.
Now remember, this is not aimed at the people in the room. This is a PR agency, okay? The PR agency doesn't produce the material for the people in the room. If there are people in the room, it's like a TV studio. They're just props.
Well, I think you could see that. So when that lady, Stroud is her name, when she was speaking, there were people clapping, and you don't know what they were clapping for, or even if it was during her talk, but they do it. It's like, see, people, all these people are agreeing with the speaker. Everything's timed perfectly for a reason. And you got the beautiful, very emotive music, very uplifting, very motivating. Oh yeah, I want to do something now. I want to act. You've got your Jordan Petersons. You've got a lot of people saying some good stuff, right stuff, about parenting, whatnot. Also, what I thought was very interesting in today's day and age, there were very predominantly white faces in the audience and the speakers. You had one token kind of black speaker, and I think I saw one black person in the audience. So this is, again, very different from what we're seeing. Because right now on TV and the movies and adverts, everywhere it's like mixed race. It's mixed race, black and a guy with a white woman, or, black actors or Asian, ethnic people are always being pushed to the forefront, and you don't see very many white people. But in this ARC thing, it's mainly white people. And I think that's going to the group of white people who've been disadvantaged, who genuinely have been disadvantaged and are disgruntled. They're saying, look, we're on your side. We're on your side. We're on the traditional values, Christian values. We're going to reclaim your country. You can rely on us. And look, there's hardly any. There's no Pakis. There's no brown people. There's no yellow people. There's one token black person who's just, saying the stuff that we're all saying. See, you can trust in us. We're going to look after you. We're on your side. I mean, there's so many other layers to it, but yeah, that's what I took away from it.
Yeah. So this is obviously a very, very slick operation. The next thing that I want to touch on, so I mean, we've discussed Konstantin Kissing. I think it's worth discussing him because basically, since his video was uploaded on the ARC YouTube page, right, and that was 9 days ago, it is still the featured video, and it has gotten like 1.5 million views. So obviously, ARC really wants to push it. So his speech goes for about 18 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I do want to play a 5-minute part that I think you will find interesting because of, first of all, some of the things that he says and kind of like the semi-overt or outright overt like racism, right? So let's have a look at that.
Am I allowed to say I'm not a fan of him? I don't think he's particularly funny. And I don't think he's particularly charismatic. He's got this like droning voice, and it's just no. Like, but he's pushed and promoted, isn't he? You know, I
very much likes him because his speech in the previous conference was also promoted very, very heavily and featured in the promo for this year. And his speech for the current conference is the featured video.
I remember watching Trigonometry in the early days and thinking, oh great, this is anti-woke, anti-trans agenda. But then I realized it wasn't that simple. It was they had massive blind spots. They were very pro-Ukraine, anti-Putin. They didn't really talk about the lockdowns. I think they were pro-vaccine as well. And everything's just behind the curve. I know that they've been on Joe Rogan twice, I think. But it's the same themes and it's the blind spots. They'll talk about certain things, which I agree on, like the trans agenda. You can't really argue with that, or the climate agenda, which is garbage. But there's a lot of blind spots. There's a lot of things they do not talk about. And again, come across very Zionist, very this clash of civilization, us Jews and Christians on one side, Muslims and barbarians on the other. And by the way, this whole barbarian thing, this is not new. This has been happening since the Greek days. The root of the word barbarian, the Greeks came up with the word because they said, look, these people who don't speak Greek, they're babbling, blah, 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 blah. So the word barbarian comes from people who babble, other people. That's all it is. But the funny thing is those other people were not barbarians because they knew Greek and their own native language. They had their own culture. They had their own art. But the Greek city-states and the Greek democracy with their system relied on slavery and colonization. So they colonized other lands and enslaved other lands. That's how the Greek system worked. So this idea that the Greeks were enlightened and wonderful, yeah, in some respects, but it was built on the back of slavery and colonization of other people. And these so-called barbarians, it was just a form of racism. You can colonize and enslave other people if you other them, if you dehumanize them, if you say they're stupid, they're backward, they're uncivilized, they're uncultured, they deserve to be enslaved. We deserve to be the rulers and they deserve to be the slaves. So this whole idea of, the Western civilization built on Greek values and, we need to keep the barbarians away. I mean, even that is just all BS. So, and it's the same trick they use again and again. So now we can justify bombing Syria and the Palestinians because guess what? They're subhuman. They're barbarians. Look what the Israelis are talking about the Palestinians, the Amalek people. They're subhuman. They're not. We can kill them as they're evil. They're bad. They're uncultured. They're sexually deviant. They're misogynist. I mean, you call it whatever you want. Is the age-old technique of dehumanizing others to justify your evil in them while claiming to be the enlightened ones. Anyway, back to you, buddy.
You're gonna love that one. So that's basically the theme of Kissing's speech, and obviously Art really, really likes it because they're pushing it very, very hard. Like it's still the featured video. So here's some. Let's see how much nonsense we can put into 5 minutes.
To express reasonable and widely held views.
Reasonable and widely held views on Twitter. All right, that's a good start. Let's start
because
with
of
that.
this, other social media companies are now fearful of being too aggressive in their censorship too. Now, it's true, we haven't yet won the argument on freedom of speech here in Europe. I thought the most hilarious example of this was last week, when J.D. Vance gave a speech in Munich in which he criticized European leaders for trying to shut down speech that they don't like. The reaction? The German politician stood up and went, "This is unacceptable!" The accent was a bit much, all right. So that's the positives, but there's been a lot of bad too. I mean, if you want to understand how bad the crime problem's become in Britain, British people used to deal with crime by moving the criminals to Australia. Now British people deal with crime by moving to Australia.
The crowd goes wild.
The number of testicular injuries in women's sports is through the roof. I don't think this is a laughing matter. We can all agree women's safety is incredibly important, which is why we must do a much better job of protecting their balls. See, it's jokes like that that get me accused of being a conservative. And I hate it when people call me a conservative because I have made many mistakes over the last 14 years, but even I haven't let in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants.
Michael, just pause it. So the funny thing is, I mean, the audience are just sycophants. They're just pathetic as far as I'm concerned. They're all just laughing and clapping on cue. I mean, some of his jokes are not that bad. That one about the balls and everything, that's quite funny. But the thing is, it's a lie to say the Conservatives let in the 100,000 immigrants. It was also Labour. It's a policy of the Union Party. But this is a controlled destruction of the Conservative Party so that the Reform Party can take its place. Emmy, carry on.
Yeah, well, that's basically what Assange said as well in his arc appearance. But yeah, let's keep going.
Achieved the unachievable. There is now a consensus in this country on that issue. I'm not saying we have a monopoly on genius. There are exceptions, like COVID. That was invented in China. Oh, it's controversial. Look, I know it's a controversial joke. In my defense, it's not a joke. COVID was clearly a Chinese virus. Hardworking, made on the cheap, and very good at multiplying.
You like that one?
Where do we even begin? I mean,
yes, that's a whole podcast episode just in itself. But yeah,
I mean, that is just promoting the whole lab leak, Wuhan, China, not talking about the role of the American and British governments, our military industrial complex, our politicians, Bill and Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It doesn't talk about our big pharma influence, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, the Wellcome Trust, Imperial College, the modeling. It doesn't talk about any of it, just blames it on the Chinese. It's kind of racist, neo-colonial attitude, and then stereotypes, and they laugh. They laugh.
Yep. No, well, not to mention that obviously it amplifies the current acceptable narrative of a lab leak. Yeah.
So can I tell you something? Do you know how many people, my supporters and other people, sent me clips of this and said, "Isn't this brilliant?" And I just sighed and rolled my eyes. But the problem is, people on our side listen to this and think this is great, and it's like they think we're idiots for criticizing it. They think we're black-pilled and doom and gloom and what the hell is wrong with you? And they actually think this guy's great and this speech is great. And it's like, man, why can't you see what we see? Anyway, we're clearly in a little echo chamber. Now the question is, how many people out there are going to see what we see? Are we wrong, Michael, Ursula? Are we just nut jobs? Isn't this guy brilliant? Apart from the slightly big tie, I mean, he's looking good. Anyway, carry on, Michael.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's I guess that's a discussion later for the solution section. I'll just move on. I'm not gonna play the whole 5 minutes, but then later on, just to summarize, like the last point that he's making is that basically Western civilization is the epitome of civilization. All major like developments in human history came from the West, came from the white man, from the Judeo-Christian culture. Obviously, not mentioning the Chinese that had an advanced culture and wrote the Art of War 4,000 years ago when Europeans still lived in caves, or like the Muslims who invented algebra like I don't know 3,000 years ago, whatever.
And the Muslims, the Arabs, created our current numerical system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it wasn't for them, we'd still be using the Roman system. You'd have these massive abacuses and whatnot. There's so much science that's come out of other places. This is all about the othering. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Islam. I've left that religion for a reason. But to just say, all Christianity is just all wonderful. I mean, you could say that was used to enslave, most of the world and to kill millions of people from, ethnic indigenous populations around the world. It was used to do a lot of evil, as have most religions. This idea that, Judeo-Christian values, one, it doesn't even exist. That's just a complete nonsensical. But, that they're better, it's just fundamentally racist. I bet you Jesus is crying right now in heaven. It's like, geez Louise. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, I actually have, I think, well, if we're talking about religion already, I think I have a quote here of someone that actually wrote something really good as a response to one of my notes on Substack, which I really, really like. Just give me a second and I'll find out. I have it open.
I mean it, seriously, Jesus is weeping right now. He's weeping. Weeping. What are these people saying in my name? Not in my name.
So here you go. That's a very, very good quote about religion, which I think, so someone is basically speaking about their own personal experience. So even though religion has been instrumental in shaping communal violence and hatred all over the world, right? It doesn't release a person from being moral. Neither it's a license to feel superior. I think it's a very, very good quote. So that's basically just from a comment that someone made on something that I posted and I really, really like. Another thing that I think is worth pointing out here, because that person has spoken again this year. Her name is Jennifer. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. Marohasi. So she's a climate, like a real climate scientist from Australia, right? And she attended last year and basically gave her criticism of in the preparation for this conference. And here's what she said: they are successfully creating a story that is unifying the conservative message on a range of issues. I am referring to the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship that will be meeting in London this week. They include so many influential politicians, even Mike Johnson, the 56th Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Donald Trump mentioned him by name second, or was it third, in his inaugural address on becoming president again. Johnson is on the advisory board of ARC, and spoke at the first ARC conference in London in November 2023. And now in this one as well. I was there. They claim to be working on relaying the foundations of our civilization, but there will be no mention of science or climate science. The conference will be in London, in the home of the Royal Society that has more recently been captured by much that is fashionable. And fashion is, of course, the lowest form of ideology. Now, one thing that I think is worth mentioning is what she said about a guy called Lomborg. Okay, so Bjorn Lomborg, who also spoke this year. Okay, ARC will likely also continue to promote the policies of one of the darlings of the heterodox climate consensus community, political scientist Bjorn Lomborg. Lomborg will likely tell the delegates that the global warming is real, human caused, but he will say it is just not an emergency. He will speak on what is fashionable, and he will be applauded by all the polite conservatives and their hangers-on. Lomborg and one of his founders, Bill Gates, now see an advantage in an energy transition to nuclear. That was something Margaret Thatcher first proved back in the 1980s, only to be told by Nigel Lawson that nuclear could only be competitive with North Sea gas, etc., if there was government intervention, subsidies, and on it goes. When I attended the first ARC conference, I was dismayed by all that I heard, especially the penultimate closing address that was by Lomborg, as well as assuring us that carbon dioxide was responsible for climate change. He mentioned the advantages of vaccines. Okay, so I mean, she goes on and on. I'm not going to keep reading it, but yeah. So that's Lomborg spoke again this year. I'm not going to play his speech. I do want to touch, I guess, on three people. Okay, one is Peter Thiel, who unfortunately he spoke at this year's conference, but his speech is nowhere to be found. I think he was interviewed by Jordan Peterson in the first day, but they still haven't uploaded his video to this day anywhere on any social media platform. So I don't know, maybe someone who was actually there in person can comment on what was actually discussed, right?
That in itself is quite telling.
Correct.
The fact that they're not promoting it, because like you said, it's a PR event, and the PR event, the whole point is to make shorts and clips and YouTubes and get it on discussed on podcasts and promote these ideas. And the fact that they've kept it quiet means something went wrong. It was either too far, too obvious, too blatant, and would damage them. So they're like, oh no, we can't do this, or something else. Like that in itself is quite telling, actually. The fact it's not all over the airwaves.
I think my opinion is that I think Thiel wasn't happy with how it turned out, and he basically ordered not to push it. The only thing that's not to publish it. The only thing that's possible, maybe he canceled in the last minute and didn't show up. I just don't know. But what is interesting, right? I don't have his speech at ARC, but what I have is this thing there. This one, yep, this one. Okay? So just the name kind of tells you something. Can you see it? Sorry, you're muted, Ahmed. Can you see well? Yeah, you can see my screen.
Yeah. Apocalypse Now, Peter Thiel on ancient prophecies in modern tech. Yeah, that's interesting.
So that's from 3 months ago. I highly recommend people. I mean, this is wild. So this is a deeply philosophical discussion with very, very heavy theological undertones. Very heavy, right? Scripture quoting, the whole shebang with this guy. and Peter Thiel. Now, the actual channel that is uploaded on is the Hoover Institution. Now, if you don't know what the Hoover Institution is, it's something in Stanford, where I think Peter Thiel also went, like where he studied. Now, what is even more interesting is who's the current director of the Hoover Institution, right? Now, you can Google it if you want, but I'll give you a hint that she, and the emphasis is on she, was a very prominent member of the second Bush administration. Her name starts with C. Her last name starts with R. I think you should be able to tell by now. Condoleezza Rice. She's the director of the Hoover Institution. This is obviously like, I don't even know what to call it, but I mean, that's like the more militaristic side, I guess, of the Republican Party. And he talks about very, very interesting. It's kind of like the whole video. It's wild. I thought of like playing some parts of it, but I just don't want it to be too long. The whole video is 47 minutes of basically Peter Thiel gaslighting us. Why? Because he keeps talking about AI warfare and the dangers of AI-enabled drones and how the battlefield is going to change and how AI can bring the end to the civilization as we know it and all that sort of stuff, right? While at the same time, right? Let me do this.
His Palantir is doing all the AI drone warfare in
okay.
Gaza.
Yeah, funny you mentioned Palantir. Here's an ad from Palantir. Battles are won before they start. Palantir. Right? And he talks about the dangers of AI bringing the end of civilization, and we're living in end times. And like, basically we need to watch out for the arrival of the Antichrist. Like Peter Thiel says that in that video.
I'll just jump in there, Ahmed, because I'm going to go in a minute. It's getting late here. But I think Michael's making a really good point there that is kind of a recurrent theme through the Ark and Legatum empire. And that is hypocrisy, the utter hypocrisy of these people, where they can lie so blatantly and say that they want peace in the world, that they want Christian values to be reincorporated into the family and communities, and what they're actually doing and making massive, massive profits from is the reverse. It's the absolute opposite of what they're claiming that they are doing. And it's insulting to people's intelligence. The first thing that I noticed about the Schellenberger, the advisory board, the presence of Schellenberger on there, was because I'd been reading the legal case that Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford, etc., and Schellenberger had been involved with, where they're actually criticizing the Omidyar network for their fake fact-checking entity, right? So on the one hand, he's going to law, spending millions of dollars probably in this legal case that's going on and on and on, and he failed in the end, but whether it's going to go anywhere now, I don't know. And then in the same year, he's taking up an offer of being on the advisory board for basically the Legatum group, who is partnered with, very closely associated with, the Omidyar media network that actually is paying for the fake fact checkers. It is such an hypocrisy, and the vaccine thing, is another example.
A lot of it, people need to understand, is the world is a theater, and what that means is that you have a show. You have WWF wrestlers who appear to be hating each other when it's just an act. They're playing along. They pretend that they're against each other, that they're opposing sides, when they're the same side. It's all part of the show. Then you have good guys, you have bad guys, you have pantomime villains, you have pantomime goodies. Everything's a show, and I think that's a bit difficult for people to understand. But going back to Peter Thiel, an imposter at ARC, this year. And so they mentioned about Peter Thiel and what he was talking about. Let me find it here. Peter Thiel comes beaming in from United States to talk about AI It's disappointing that he's speaking from a sunny living room and not a dark underground lair full of jars of organic blood. So they're framing it. They're like, if you think he's a bad guy, then you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
His interview with Jordan Peterson is short but interesting. We have to embrace AI, he says, for all its risks, because doing otherwise means being trapped in the Groundhog Day of contemporary stagnation. Will it not make human beings increasingly redundant if we outsource a lot of our creative and intellectual work? Perhaps. So perhaps we need Christianity as a reminder of man's inherent worth. It's a nice thought. Though if Christianity is true and its truth is surely the important question, it does not exist to make us feel good about ourselves. So I mean, it's all weird. So even within that, he brings in AI, he brings in Christianity, because I think they're pulling on the heartstrings of Christians, good, decent people. It's always coming back to that. It's like, guys, you're Christians. You know, it's all about Christian values. Come on board with us. Support what we're doing because we're on the side of Jesus and good. And it's it's just it's deceit. It's complete lie. It's hypocrisy. Because like you guys have said, Peter Thiel's behind Palantir. Palantir is currently, everything that's going on in Gaza, again, multiple gains. One of them, I believe, is testing AI, facial recognition, drone technology, AI automation, targeting, and they're fine tuning that. Palestine, Gaza has been the test bed for that. And then, like you said, Michael, he's 1 minute he's talking about, oh my God, it's terrible what could be happened, but it's his money and tech that's behind it.
And literally, as I said in the other video that I just showed you in the Hoover Institution, a couple of months before that, like he said, we got to be really cautious with AI and approach it very, very carefully because this technology can destroy us. And he basically almost portrayed AI as the arrival of the Antichrist. He said that.
Yep.
And that's not 3 years ago. That's like that video is from 3 months ago, right? I mean, I really encourage people to watch that video in full. It is wild. It is wild. Like it gets full on end times, right? I don't know what Remit Hoover Institution has to talk about like religious stuff. I don't know much about him other than Condoleezza Rice is the boss. But yeah, it is pretty crazy. Now, obviously, his guy in the UK, so the head of Palantir in the UK, also spoke at ARC. And the theme of his talk, I'm not going to get into that, but the theme of his talk, listen to this. The title that I gave to his talk is Bursting the Big Tech Bubble and What Happens Next. We are entering unknown lands. Lois Mosley believes Lois Mosley believes we have reached a turning point with the systems and controls that we have, blah, 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 etc., etc., etc. And we said, look, big tech is very dangerous. We gotta, be very careful. Mate, who do you work for? Who are you? He's the head of Palantir in the UK.
Wow. Right, listen, we've got 5 minutes because my wife's leaving this morning and I'll be left to look after the kids.
Okay, mate. Yeah.
If you're to wrap up about ARC and what we haven't done actionable things. Let's do another podcast.
To do part 2.
You and me, part 2, we talk about the actionable steps that people can take, the positive steps.
Here's the takeaway in 5 minutes. You kind of already said that. But what we need to understand, that the enemy, like the real enemy, they understand us much better than we understand ourselves. They've been at it for generations, for centuries. They understand human psychology to levels that we don't even comprehend. And one of the most basic things that they know about human psychology is 2 things. When you push the pendulum too far into one side, it wants to automatically go very extreme to the other side. So you push the woke narrative, anti-religion, atheist, everyone wants to go super conservative, super religious. One thing. The other thing is, and that's a very basic tenet of human psychology, is we want to be led. We want to be saved. We want someone to come in and fix the very complex world and the very complex problems that we have, so that we don't have to do it ourselves because we don't know what to do. So let's let other smarter people from industry or from government or from the UN or from the Gates Foundation, or they'll look after us. They're a lot smarter. They have all these degrees. They went to university and they have all this money. If they have all this money, they have to be smart, right? That's basically it. So the WF is obviously that woke, climate, trends, all that sort of stuff. And obviously people are onto it now. It disgusts people. It becomes like a freak show, right? So they turn to the exact opposite. So they have that organization ready to capture the exact opposite before people even realize they want to go there.
This is it.
That's it.
That's it.
So that's what ARC is. And both of them are PR firms. They both play narratives on 2 opposing sides, but both narratives lead to the same end game. They both lead to AI. They both lead to transhumanism. They both lead to digital ID. They both lead to CBDC. And like, it is so obvious. It's like it's like, it's like trying to deny gravity, and people don't see it.
Mate, 100%. So 100%. And so what I would say when it comes to WEF, you've described that so well, and ARC is starboard tack is ARC, port tack is WEF, and where's the final direction? Straight up. And the straight up direction is digital IDs, digital currency, transhumanism, technocracy. All right, one world government, corporations and globalists working together. It's all one world government. But the boat looks like it's veering from one to the other direction, but the general direction is the same. It's going in one direction. Does that know what it is?
And the same thing is, I mean, if I just one final point to touch on that, the same thing is like, the West and BRICS. Like there's this narrative that like, Putin and like BRICS nations are fighting the globalists, right? And there's a very good, I'm not going to play the video here, but there's a very good segment that James Corbett did, right? Probably a month ago now, where he basically like, they had this meeting in Kazan, and they basically issued the Kazan Declaration about their principles. And you read the Kazan Declaration, and you read any document coming from the UN or the WF, it's literally copy-paste.
Yeah.
Literally. The same thing, like, 5G, sustainable development, digital ID, vaccines, vaccine equity, all that sort of stuff. Same thing. So, I mean, you don't need to be like a genius and like do very deep analysis to figure it out. It is like literally in your face. These are two are the same color, and people for some reason start to think, no, this is black, this is white. They are the same color.
Yep. Yeah. It's like I can't disagree with that. I mean, everything is such a show. It's unbelievable. Like, for example, the clips going around. Again, I'm getting people sending it to me saying, "Look, it's amazing. Look what's happening." The showdown between Zelensky and Vance and Trump, and they're like, "Look, he gave him a public dressing down, and Zelensky got mannerized. And see, this is the end of the war, and Trump is doing amazing." And it's like, are you kidding me? This is like the most like awful. Like in the morning TV, where couples come in and they fight each other and they're arguing and it's all like this public drama. You ever seen one of these?
It's the Jerry Springer show.
That's it.
So Jerry, that's what it is.
It was literally like the Jerry Springer show. It was like, how dare you come to our country and tell us what to do? I'm not telling you what to do, but you know what? You guys don't need to understand that when it comes to you, don't you tell us when it comes to us. I mean, who talks like this? Politicians talk like this. It was just such a show. It was an obvious show. Like, Zelensky could have done so many arguments like, hey, but you guys came and did the color revolution and it's your web. Why did you fund us if you're then going to stop this? He could have done all these other arguments, but he didn't. He was like this public dressing down and Vance and Trump and, oh, you should be grateful and you didn't come. And did you say sorry? Did you apologize? Did you thank us? It was a fracking Jerry Springer show. It was a joke.
But they are literally actors. Like, they are literally actors. Like, Zelensky is an actor and Trump is an actor. Like, they are literally actors.
Yeah, but I have people pinging me all night. I wake up. Multiple people are sending me, look at this. Isn't it amazing? And I'm like, oh, God. Come on, folks. Can't you see what's going on here? It's hard, dude. The cognitive dissonance is strong. It's strong. And maybe it's always going to be like this. Maybe human nature is just... it's like this.
But we have to change. We have to change that. Otherwise, we are in deep boo-boo. Very, very deep. But that's a discussion for another time.
This is what I keep saying. Some people say, oh, you know what? No, we need to have faith in some good people. And if not, it's better than the bad option. It's better that this bad person is in power because they're less bad than the other. And they're still doing a lot of good things and they're still waking up people. But the way I look at it is, yeah, they're waking up people to certain facts after the event, after it matters. And the reason why they're releasing it is so that they can do a controlled demolition of the old thing and reintroduce the new thing, which is their pivot, which is their control. They are manipulating you. They're manipulating people. And just because you were ahead of the curve and they're getting everyone else now to come on board doesn't mean it's great, because they are still steering the boat. And what we need to do is get off the boat. We need to get our own boat. We need to steer in our direction.
Yeah, we need to take the wheel. That's what we need. Ultimately, that's what we need to take, because that boat is going somewhere, whether we like it or not. So we either Like, we either can control where that boat is going, or that boat is going to take us where they want to take us. And we're not going to like either whether it's the left or the right or the center, we're not going to like it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And all I say to people is be your own leader, have discernment, don't fall for the propaganda. Everything you see on the TV is propaganda, everything. And for some people, unfortunately, that's very uncomfortable. They don't like it. They don't like it. They don't like it. And there's a lot of Christians on that front who say to me, "Oh, Ahmed, why are you having a bad time?" Because these people now who are pivoting on the right are appealing to Christians. So Christians think that they're on our side, that they're the good guys, but they're not. It's the devil. It is literally the devil seducing you. And it's like, guys, look at that. And another thing people say is, "Oh, I don't believe in anything. I just believe in Jesus going to save me." I can tell you right now, Jesus doesn't want that. Jesus wants you to save yourself. Jesus was a badass freedom fighter. And Jesus wasn't waiting around for someone else to save him. God, he was like, you know what? You have to save yourself. So like we need to save ourselves. And that means be our own leaders, have discernment, don't put our hope and faith in all these false messiahs, and we need to stop being played. Agreed?
100%, mate. 100%. We need to do a little bit more than that, but that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, that's a good start.
That will be your part 2, okay? I know you've got a whole thing about actionable truth, right? I mean, literally your podcast, your Substack, actionable truth. Like, what is it we can all do? And that'll be for another day. Right, listen, my friend, you and Ursula, I really appreciate what you've done. Thank you so much. God bless you. We'll have you back and have a wonderful evening. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Lovely coming on board again.
I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and/or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.